It started with a simple motion alert. Marshall Clark, 63, poured his second cup of decaf as the winter wind howled outside his modest bungalow in Ellison Falls, Nebraska. Retired after nearly 4 decades working county maintenance, he didn't have much use for high-tech gadgets. But ever since the break-in 3 winters ago, his daughter, Kelly, insisted on installing security cameras, inside and out. That morning, as he sat by the window wrapped in a faded U.S. Army blanket, sipping from his chipped "World's Okayest Dad" mug, he noticed a red dot flashing on the app. Something had triggered the motion sensor in the living room. Curious, Marshall tapped the alert and watched. At first, the footage showed nothing unusual. The beige recliner sat still in its usual corner, the same chair where his late wife, Ellen, used to sit every evening, knitting or humming old Patsy Cline songs. But 23 seconds in, something happened. The chair moved. Not a wobble. Not a draft-induced creak. It slid, smoothly, slowly, as if someone had nudged it from behind. Marshall sat forward, the heat from his coffee forgotten. His hand trembled slightly as he rewound the footage, then again. Same result. Empty room. Silent shift. The chair moved, on its own. His heart thumped, but not from fear. It was something else. A whisper of memory. A question forming. Had Ellen come back? Marshall set the mug down carefully, staring at the frozen frame on his phone. The recliner was unmistakably out of place, a good 6 inches closer to the center of the room than it had been for years. He hadn't moved it. No one had. He lived alone now. As the sun rose pale over the frost-covered lawn, Marshall shuffled over to the chair in person, half expecting to find footprints, or some logical explanation. Nothing. The floor was clean, undisturbed. Quiet, except for the low ticking of the grandfather clock that Ellen's father had built back in '58. Marshall sat in the chair, just to feel it. The cushions still carried her shape. He used to joke that Ellen had claimed the recliner the day they bought it, 1987, from Jensen's Furniture down on Main Street. A little extravagance after their youngest, Joey, left for college. He closed his eyes. Suddenly, it was the late '80s again. Ellen was in the kitchen, humming that tune, "Crazy," by Patsy Cline, and Joey was teasing her about her off-key notes. Marshall remembered it all. The worn linoleum under his boots, the smell of meatloaf in the oven, the love that hung in the air like sunlight after rain. But life had changed. Joey had passed in '96. A car accident. College town. Black ice. Marshall exhaled, long and heavy. "Ellen," he whispered. "If you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening." Just then, a creak came from the hallway. Slow. Steady. Like footsteps. He stood quickly, eyes wide. But there was nothing there. Nothing but memory, and the sound of a chair, gently rocking. Marshall didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table with the security footage playing on loop. Again and again, the chair moved exactly the same way. No wind. No rodents. No tricks of the light. Just a silent shift across the floor. It chilled him, but not in a frightening way, more like how he used to feel standing at attention in the army, heart steady, instincts alert. Like something important was happening, and he needed to be present. By morning, snow had blanketed the town in a quiet hush. He stepped outside for the paper and paused, looking at the swing hanging from the old maple tree. He hadn't taken it down since Joey was a boy. It still creaked in the wind, just like it did that final Christmas, when Ellen's cough had started sounding worse. That winter, 2003, was the last one with her. Cancer. Fast and cruel. He'd never forget sitting by her hospital bed, her hand in his, whispering, "Promise me you won't close the door, Marsh. Keep the light on. For me. For Joey." He had nodded, tears threatening, not understanding what she meant. She smiled faintly. "You'll know one day." 20 years later, the house still held her touch. Knitted blankets, floral curtains, that chipped ceramic angel she kept by the window. And now this chair, moving by itself. Was the light she asked for this? Marshall sat back down, rubbing his weathered hands together. If this is you, Ellie, he murmured, I never stopped missing you. Not for a second. Then his phone pinged. Another motion alert. The chair had moved again. The second clip was almost identical. Same time of day, same movement, just a gentle slide forward. No visible force. No sound but the faint hum of the heating vent in the corner. Marshall replayed it half a dozen times, then grabbed his coat. He needed someone else to see this, someone who wouldn't laugh or blame it on meds he wasn't taking. So he drove 5 miles into town, down the icy 2-lane road that hadn't changed much since the 70s, to the coffee shop that still carried the smell of burnt toast and overbrewed Folgers. Dot's Diner, run by Dorothy Kellerman, widow of Marshall's old army buddy, Chuck. Dot spotted him as he stepped in, brushing snow off his shoulders. Well, I'll be. She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. Twice in 1 week? You feeling all right? Marshall managed a grin. You got a minute? She poured 2 black coffees without asking, and they sat in the corner booth, same one Chuck and Marshall used to occupy every Sunday morning after church. He pulled out his phone and played the footage. Dot watched in silence, one eyebrow raised. Now, that ain't wind, she said finally. Ain't no breeze in a shut-up house in the middle of February. I know, Marshall said quietly. That was Ellen's chair. Dot set her mug down slowly. You think it's her? I don't know what I think. But it feels like her. Dot leaned back, eyes narrowed like she was sorting through memories. I've seen a lot, Marsh. Lost a husband. Lost a brother in Nam. But I do believe, sometimes folks don't leave all at once. Marshall looked down. I never really said goodbye. Not properly. Dot reached across the table and touched his hand. Maybe she's not looking for goodbye. Maybe she's waiting on something else. Marshall nodded, unsure. Outside, snowflakes drifted past the diner window. And somewhere deep inside, something was beginning to thaw. Back home, the house felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just paused. Like it was waiting. Marshall set his keys down and stood in the hallway, staring at the recliner again. It hadn't moved since the second alert. Still angled slightly toward the TV, but now it seemed more like it was watching him than the other way around. He rubbed the back of his neck and, almost without thinking, climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. He hadn't been up there in years. Not since Ellen passed. The attic smelled of cedar and dust. He flicked on the single bulb, its chain swinging gently. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, labeled in Ellen's looping cursive, Christmas, Joey's school stuff, Dad's medals. And one box, near the back, marked only with a heart. Inside, wrapped in tissue and yellowed newspaper, were mementos, a dried rose from their first anniversary, his army dog tags, a cassette tape labeled Summer 81, Ellen singing, and a sealed envelope addressed, to Marshall, when you're ready. His hands trembled as he held it. The seal was brittle. He opened it slowly. Her handwriting, faded but clear. My love. If you're reading this, it means I've found a way to reach you. Don't be afraid. What moves isn't always meant to scare you. Sometimes it's just love trying to get through. Marshall sat down hard on a wooden crate, eyes blurring. You always said you'd have one more thing to fix around the house before you could rest. But not everything broken needs fixing. Some things just need remembering. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Ellen was gone. But she was still here. That night, Marshall didn't turn on the TV. Instead, he played the old cassette from the attic. The whir of the tape deck filled the room, followed by the faint strumming of a guitar, Joey's, and then Ellen's voice, soft and unsteady but full of warmth. She was singing, "You Are My Sunshine," laughing halfway through when she missed a note. Marshall sat in the recliner, eyes closed, and for a few minutes, he was back in the summer of 1981. Joey barefoot in the yard, Ellen humming while she folded laundry on the porch, and him, freshly home from work, leaning against the doorway with his heart fuller than he ever realized at the time. That night, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt inhabited. At around 2 a.m., he woke to the sound of a cupboard closing gently in the kitchen. He blinked, sat up slowly, and reached for the bat he kept by the door, just in case. But when he got to the kitchen, it wasn't a stranger he found. It was a smell. Apple cinnamon. Ellen's pie recipe. He turned on the light. The room was empty, the oven cold. But the scent lingered, like a memory stepping out of a dream. He looked at the kitchen chair tucked in by the window. It too had moved. Just an inch, barely noticeable. But he noticed. And for the first time in years, Marshall said aloud in the quiet, "Thank you for not leaving me behind." The chair didn't move again. But the warmth stayed. The next morning, Marshall stood outside Joey's old bedroom for a long time before opening the door. He hadn't been in there in over a decade. After Joey's death, Ellen had tried to keep it just as he left it. Concert posters still on the walls, baseball glove on the nightstand, his college notebooks half filled with dreams about journalism and stories from road trips he never got to finish. When Ellen passed, Marshall had simply closed the door. But now, something was pulling him in. The room was dust-covered but untouched, like a time capsule sealed in grief. Marshall stepped inside, ran a hand along the edge of the twin bed, and sat slowly. The mattress creaked. On the desk was an old, unopened letter addressed to Dad. His breath caught. The handwriting was Joey's. He picked it up with both hands, sat back, and opened it. "Hey Pops. I know we don't always say stuff like this, but I'm proud of you. I see how you take care of Mom, how you work hard, never complain. I know I've messed up, skipped classes, chased dumb dreams, but I just wanted to say thanks. For being there. For sticking around. If anything ever happens, just know I saw you. I always did." Marshall didn't realize he was crying until a teardrop smudged the ink. All these years, he'd buried his grief under silence, thinking maybe it would hurt less. But here it was, his son's voice, like a balm to his battered heart. He whispered through trembling lips, "I saw you too, Joey." Behind him, something on the wall shifted. A poster, slightly crooked now, though no wind had blown. Later that afternoon, Marshall went into town again. Not for groceries, not for company, but for something he hadn't dared seek in years: answers. He pulled into the dusty parking lot of the VFW hall, the same one he used to visit with Chuck back in the 80s after work, back when old war stories poured like beer on Friday nights. Inside, the place was nearly empty, save for one man hunched over the pool table, lining up a shot. "Ray Jensen?" Marshall called. The man turned slowly. He looked older, slower. Time had added weight and hollowed his eyes. A long scar traced down the left side of his face. "Clark?" Ray said, surprised. "Haven't seen you since Ellen's funeral." Marshall nodded grimly. "I need to talk to you. About Joey." Ray's eyes darkened. "That was a long time ago." "Long enough," Marshall replied. "But I still don't understand why Joey was in your truck the night he died. No one ever told me why you were both out there. You vanished from the investigation. And you know that." Ray sat down slowly at the corner table, sighing like a man who'd been carrying a mountain too long. "He was looking for someone," Ray said quietly. "Said a teacher at the college was hurting kids, covering it up. Joey was writing an exposé. Said he had evidence. He wanted protection. I told him to wait." Marshall's breath hitched. "That night," Ray continued, "he called me. Said he had proof and was scared. I was driving him to meet someone he said could confirm it. But the road iced, and we never got there." Marshall stared, cold sinking in. "You never told anyone?" Ray shook his head. "Joey asked me not to. Said he didn't want his name dragged through gossip. Told me if he didn't make it, let it go." Marshall stood, fists clenched. "You let my son die with the truth buried." Ray looked up, ashamed. "Maybe. But maybe now, you can dig it up." That night, Marshall couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, Ellen's quilt pulled to his chest, listening to the silence of the house. But it wasn't silent. Not really. In the distance, the old floorboards creaked. The pipes gave their usual moan. And then, faint, nearly missed, he heard a soft click coming from Joey's room. He rose quietly and followed the sound. There, on Joey's desk, sat a small, dusty tape recorder. The kind reporters used back in the day. Marshall didn't remember seeing it when he was there earlier, but maybe he'd overlooked it. Or maybe it hadn't been there. The red play button was pressed down. Marshall slowly picked it up, heart pounding, and hit rewind. It whirred for nearly a full minute before stopping. Then he pressed play. Joey's voice crackled through the speaker. "This is Joey Clark. March 17th, 1996. I'm recording this in case something happens to me. I think Professor Leland is hurting students. I found 3 kids who said so, but they're scared. I've got copies of their statements. If I don't make it, don't let this die with me. Don't let him get away with it." Marshall froze. The tape clicked off. He sat down hard on the bed, shaking. All these years, he believed Joey had died chasing some reckless dream. Instead, his son had died trying to do the right thing. Trying to protect others. Trying to be the man Marshall had raised him to be. He looked around the room, whispered into the stillness. "I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner, son." Somewhere outside, wind rustled the trees. But inside the house, it was as if someone, had finally exhaled. The next morning, Marshall called Kelly, his daughter, who lived 2 hours away. "Kelly, I found something, a tape Joey left behind. It's about the night he died." There was a long pause. "Dad, I didn't know. I didn't either until now. Joey was investigating a professor, said the man was hurting kids and hiding it. He wanted to expose him." Kelly's voice cracked. "We never knew why it really happened." Marshall felt a rush of anger and sadness. "Neither did I. But I'm going to find out. I owe that to Joey. To Mom. To all of us." Kelly sighed, but her resolve was clear. "I'm coming home." Together, they began piecing together the fragments of their family's buried history. They visited the college library, spoke with old friends of Joey's, and even reached out to local reporters who remembered the rumors that had quietly circulated but were never spoken of openly. Each conversation opened wounds, but also brought new light. Marshall and Kelly realized that grief, no matter how deep, could be a starting point, a chance to reconnect, heal, and seek justice. In those long conversations, surrounded by faded photos and forgotten memories, Marshall felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. One afternoon, while sorting through more of Ellen's things in the attic, Kelly found an old stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Letters Ellen had written to Marshall during his army deployment in Vietnam, but never sent. Marshall took them gently, his hands trembling. Each letter was filled with hope, worry, and love, pages of a woman holding on to the man she adored while facing her own battles back home. One letter stood out, dated just weeks before Marshall's discharge. "Dearest Marsh, every day, I pray you come home safe. I'm scared for the world out there, and for us. But I believe in you. In us. When you walk back through that door, we'll start fresh. I want you to know. I forgive you for the things you never meant to say. And I hope you forgive me for the times I stayed silent." Marshall's voice cracked as he read it aloud. "She carried more than I ever knew." Kelly sat beside him. "Mom's kindness, it wasn't just for us. It was a shield, a promise to keep everyone safe." Marshall nodded, feeling the weight of decades lift just a little. Maybe that's what she meant about not closing the door. Not giving up on family, no matter how broken it feels. In the quiet attic light, father and daughter shared a moment. 2 souls reunited not just by blood, but by the enduring power of love and forgiveness. The next day, Marshall and Kelly visited the small-town sheriff's office. The walls were lined with faded badges and old newspaper clippings. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business, and no secrets stayed buried for long, or so they thought. Sheriff Ben Harper, a man with a face weathered by years on the force, greeted them cautiously. "What brings you two here?" he asked, eyeing the old photos Kelly held. Marshall took a deep breath. "We're looking into Joey's death. Found some new information that wasn't on the original report." Harper's expression hardened. "That was 29 years ago. We closed that case. Accident on a slick road. We believe it wasn't an accident," Kelly said firmly. "Joey was investigating something. We have recordings, testimonies." The sheriff rubbed his chin. "I remember Joey. Bright kid, headstrong. But when you start digging into old wounds, be careful. Some folks in this town, they want the past to stay buried." Marshall nodded slowly. "Maybe it's time the truth comes out, no matter what." Harper looked at them for a long moment. Then, quietly, he pulled out a manila folder. "Here's what we've got. It's incomplete, but maybe it helps." Inside were police notes, a few witness statements, and a report mentioning a professor named Leland, the very man Joey had accused. Marshall's heart sank, but also steeled. The road ahead was dangerous. But justice, long delayed, was worth the fight. That evening, as Marshall sat alone in the living room, a soft knock came at the door. It was Mr. Leland's former student, Linda Hayes, a woman in her early 60s with tired eyes but steady hands. "I heard you were looking into the past," she said quietly. Marshall invited her in. Linda spoke slowly, her voice thick with years of silence. "Professor Leland, he was a monster. I was one of those kids Joey tried to protect. I was scared to speak up back then. He threatened us, promised our futures would be ruined." Marshall listened, heartbreaking. Linda continued. "Joey's tape saved me, and a few others. When he died, we lost our voice. But you're giving us one more chance." Tears glistened in Marshall's eyes. "I'm sorry. We all lost so much." Linda smiled weakly. "Joey was a hero. He gave his life for justice. Now maybe we can finally heal." As she left, Marshall felt the weight of sacrifice heavier than ever. The boy he raised, lost too soon, had been fighting for kindness and justice against impossible odds. That night, the chair in the living room moved again, this time, just a gentle rocking. Marshall whispered, "Thank you, Joey. We won't forget." With Linda's testimony and the evidence from the tape, Marshall and Kelly gained new courage. They organized a small gathering at the town hall, a place where stories could be told and wounds could start to heal. Old friends, neighbors, and former students came. Some hesitant, some ready to listen. Marshall stood at the front, his voice steady but full of emotion. "We lost Joey," he said. "Not just to an accident, but to silence and fear. But tonight, we honor his courage and promise to keep his truth alive." Kelly shared Joey's letters and the tape recording, her eyes shining with both sorrow and pride. Linda spoke next, her words stirring the room. One by one, others spoke up, stories of pain, hope, and resilience. The community, once fractured by fear and secrets, began to come together. Ellen's chair sat near the front, empty but central, a silent reminder of the family's journey. As the evening ended, Marshall felt a warmth that had long eluded him. The past was still there, but so was forgiveness. And for the first time in decades, the future felt wide open. After the gathering, life settled into a new rhythm. Marshall and Kelly began volunteering at the local Veterans Center and youth outreach programs. They wanted to turn their pain into purpose, to protect others as Joey had tried to do. One chilly morning, as they walked through the town square, Marshall paused by the old maple tree where Joey's swing still hung. "Do you remember how he used to try and reach for the sky on that thing?" Kelly smiled softly. Marshall nodded, his eyes misting. "Yeah. Always dreaming bigger than this little town." Kelly looked up at him. "Maybe it's time we dream bigger too." Over time, the house seemed less haunted, the chair no longer moving on its own. Or maybe Marshall just didn't notice it anymore. He felt Ellen's presence not as a ghost, but as a gentle strength. Life, with all its scars and regrets, had offered him a second chance. To love again. To forgive. To live. And that, he realized, was the greatest story of all. Spring came slowly to the town, bringing a thaw not just to the earth but to Marshall's heart. He spent mornings tending to the garden Ellen had loved, rows of tulips, daffodils, and roses that once brightened the front yard. It was hard work for his aging hands, but healing in its own way. One afternoon, Kelly joined him, kneeling beside the flower beds. "Mom always said gardens were like families," she said. "Roots tangled together, weathering storms but growing stronger." Marshall smiled. "I guess we're planting more than flowers now." As they worked, neighbors stopped by, some with stories, others with offers to help. The community was healing alongside them. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Marshall sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The chair beside him stayed still, but he felt no fear. Instead, a quiet peace settled over him. The past, the loss, the love, all part of the garden of his life, growing deeper and more beautiful with each passing day. One evening, as twilight painted the sky soft purple and gold, Marshall sat at his desk with a pen in hand. He wrote a letter to Ellen, words he'd never spoken aloud, feelings he'd held inside for decades. "Dear Ellen, I never told you enough how much I loved you, how much I needed you. Losing you and Joey nearly broke me, but you both taught me what it means to be brave. I'm sorry for the times I wasn't the man you deserved. But I promise, I'm trying to be better. The house feels less empty now, not because of ghosts or shadows, but because of memories and love that never fade. Thank you for staying with me in ways I couldn't see, for giving me second chances. With all my heart, Marshall." He folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope addressed simply, "Home." As he looked out the window, the stars began to twinkle, a silent chorus to his unspoken prayers. In that quiet moment, Marshall felt a connection that no time or distance could sever. He was ready to face whatever came next. Weeks later, Marshall found himself alone in the living room late at night. The house was quiet, wrapped in winter's hush. He sat in Ellen's old chair, now finally still. His phone buzzed, a message from Kelly. "Dad, I found something." His heart quickened. Kelly sent a video file. Marshall pressed play. On the screen was a grainy clip from a security camera at the college, dated the night before Joey's accident. It showed a shadowy figure entering the professor's office, carrying a briefcase. Then, abruptly, the camera feed cut. Kelly's voice came over the phone, trembling. "Dad, this is the proof we needed. Leland was meeting someone, maybe to destroy evidence. We can bring this to the sheriff." Marshall's hands shook, but his resolve was steel. Joey's fight wasn't over. And neither was theirs. As he looked around the room, the chair seemed to lean slightly toward him. He smiled softly. "We've got this, son. Together." The evidence Kelly uncovered sparked a reopening of Joey's case. Sheriff Harper, armed with the video and the old tape, confronted Professor Leland. Faced with the truth, the once respected man broke under pressure. The town watched as justice slowly unfolded, not with fanfare, but with quiet acknowledgement. Marshall and Kelly attended the hearings, their hearts heavy but hopeful. One afternoon, after the case closed, Kelly hugged her father tightly. "Dad, Joey's voice finally has weight. We did it." Marshall smiled through tears. "He always deserved that." In the weeks that followed, the community began healing. Neighbors who had stayed distant came forward with stories and support. Marshall found himself surrounded not just by memories, but by living connections, friends old and new. The chair in the living room never moved again. Because what had moved was more than a piece of furniture. It was a family's love, a son's courage, and a town's conscience finally awakened. Months later, the house felt alive again, not with ghosts or shadows, but with memories breathing softly in every corner. Marshall sat in Ellen's old chair one cool autumn evening, a worn photo album on his lap. He traced the edges of faded pictures, young Joey grinning on a summer day, Ellen's gentle smile in a sunlit kitchen, himself and Kelly at a high school graduation. The chair, once a silent witness to sorrow, now cradled the man who had learned the true meaning of family, forgiveness, and second chances. Outside, the wind rustled the maple leaves, but inside, there was only peace. Marshall whispered, eyes closed. "Thank you for the love, the lessons, the light." And as if in reply, the chair didn't move. It simply held him. And that was enough. Because sometimes, the greatest stories are not about things moving on their own, but about hearts moving forward together.